Hello, my name is Ken Bravo, and I am the president of the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies, which is the umbrella organization for 90 Jewish genealogical societies around the world. And I'm here today to talk to you about the topic of DNA. And so the question is, you've done your DNA, now what? You've probably used one of these four companies, that is Ancestry, Family Tree DNA, MyHeritage DNA, or 23andMe, or maybe some combination of those, to do your DNA. And I mentioned those four because they are the largest sellers of DNA kits. And I might add here, it's important to deal with somebody, a company, that sells a lot of DNA kits, because when you have your DNA sample, they are comparing your results with the pool of results that they have. The bigger the pool, the more likely you are to find your family. Now, personally, I've done my DNA on, I started with Family Tree DNA, I've done Ancestry DNA, and as I sit here today giving you this talk, I'm waiting to get back the results from MyHeritage DNA. So what happens when you get your DNA? Well, you get your results back from the company, usually a month, 6 weeks after you sent them in. And one of the things that they're going to tell you is they're going to give you some idea, and this is from Family Tree DNA. It's going to be a little small, but you'll see here that I am 95% Ashkenazi, 3% other according to Family Tree DNA, and then they give you a map that shows where you are. Now, for some people, that's it. You've all seen those ads on TV where I thought my family came from such and such, and I did my DNA and I found out that was not true. That's only the beginning of your DNA. If you just want to know where you're from, it's like this, somebody sent me this in an email. I got my DNA kit, and it turns out I'm 86% Danish butter cookie from Costco region. If that's all you want to know, then you can stop there. If you're looking for relatives, DNA is very important. Why do I say it's important? DNA has added a scientific element to family research. It used to be that we would do the standard things in DNA, and you still need to do those standard things. We would talk to our relatives. I generally advise people to speak to their oldest relative first. We would look for records. We would, before the internet, we would write off to various government agencies and archives trying to get copies of records. Today, with the internet and the programs that are available online, you can find many of the records that you want. But what happens is those of us who do this kind of research run into these issues where we hit what we call a brick wall. And it's really a very descriptive term, because suddenly you just can't find what you're looking for. And DNA is one way to get either around or over those brick walls that are your obstacles. Now, before we go any further, let me tell you, I want to give you a warning. I'll give you a moment to digest this, but basically what this says is researching your family may lead to find information which is embarrassing to you and other members of your family. You're going to find those skeletons that are in the closet. There's no question about it. Eventually you will find it. You'll expand upon your vocabulary, because you'll learn there are things, what we call non-paternal events. You've read about them in the newspaper. Somebody, very often an adult who's lived a long life, suddenly finds out that their father is not their father. Their father was the neighbor or somebody who lived down the street or whatever. That will show up in your DNA. And for some people, that's very embarrassing. Some people are able to handle it better than others, but it is what it is, and before you go down this road, I think you should be prepared to find there will be these kinds of things um, that some people in your family never wanted to talk about and in fact did not talk about. You'll also, when you're expanding your vocabulary, you'll hear the word very much in Jewish genealogical circles, endogamy. The short version of that is, it means that we as Ashkenazi Jews, our ancestors came from small towns, shtetls, etc., and very often they married close relatives, i.e. cousins, and that winds up with a mix of DNA that leads to what I call false positives. So it may, because you're getting sometimes the same DNA from both sides, your maternal and paternal side, it may look like you're more closely related to somebody. You've also read in the newspapers, by the way, that they're using DNA now to solve crimes more than ever. If you're interested in that, I got an email the other day that ABC is starting a new program on Tuesdays, 10 to 11, featuring C.C. Moore, who is the genealogist who has solved a number of unsolved murder cases. Let's run quickly to some terminology that you will run into and that you will need. I took this from Ancestry Online. I want to give them complete credit for it. But there are three main types of DNA tests: Y chromosome or YDMA, mitochondrial, or what's called MT or mDNA, and autosomal. So let's take a look at those very quickly. Y chromosomes are passed from father to son. This is the male line. And since women do not have Y chromosomes, they can't take a Y DNA test. But while you're doing this, for those of you who are women, your brother, your father, your paternal uncle, your paternal grandfather, any of those people could supply the sample for the DNA for Y testing in your family. Very useful. I highly recommend it. Again, it's only for the male side. And you can see, and this again is an ancestry chart, but if you look at the blue on the left side, you can very clearly see that's going down from father to son on down the line. Mitochondrial DNA is from the maternal line, that is your mother's family, and are passed down from mothers to their children, male and female. Since everyone has mitochondrial DNA, both males and females can take the test. And as you'll see here, you can get how that comes down to you from your mother's side of the family. Autosomal DNA tests a person's autosomal chromosomes, and this is both maternal and paternal, both directly and indirectly. And because everyone has autosomal chromosomes, both male and females can take autosomal DNA tests, and in fact, the ancestry test is an autosomal test. It's also the autosomal test that can show what your ethnic percentages are. Some people will quibble that they're not as accurate as they could be. I believe they're getting more accurate all the time as these companies get more and more data. And here's a chart showing the autosomal DNA. Okay. This talk today is really just touching the surface. So if you're really interested, I would highly recommend the book that you're seeing on your screen now, The Family Tree Guide to DNA Testing and Genetic Genealogy. You can order it on Ancestry or other similar sources. I'm sorry, on Amazon or other similar sources, and I would highly recommend it to you. If you want to look online, there's a woman who lives out in San Diego named Kitty Cooper, who is very big into DNA and has a blog on it. I'll leave this up for a second so you can see that's the website. If you type that into your computer, it'll take you to Kitty's blog. Lots of information, and she's always updating that information. So other than compared to the book, for example, the website is always being updated. Okay, so what happens? You take your DNA test and you get the results back. What you're looking at now, and I'm going to blow up sections of it in a moment, but I went through my email and I pulled up a whole list of emails that I received from Family Tree DNA. And here you can see it a little better. So when they find a match, they send me an email. Let's take a little closer look at the top one of these, and the email will say, "New relative found." I used to get all excited about that. The problem is when you dig into it, and when you click on it, and you see what it says, all it really gives me is the name of this person. And when I go into what he's posted, the only thing in there that's of any use to me is his email address. And what I have found, and I don't mean to discourage anybody, is very often I will try and reach out to contact these people. If I hear from them at all, they know much less than I do very often about the family. And keep in mind that a lot of this is because historically women have changed their names. And so to try and trace women through typical traditional research sources makes it very difficult if you don't know who they married. Quick tip here, if you can find obituaries, they're very helpful because obituaries will tell you the deceased daughter's names and their married names, so very helpful. That's not to say I haven't found anything on Family Tree DNA, and if you take a look, all these people that I have check marks for are people who I have matched. Okay, what I'm showing you now is, and this is going to scroll through it, it takes a few minutes, but this is just a partial list of what I found on Ancestry DNA when I did my Ancestry DNA. I don't expect you to be able to read it. I'm showing it to you for the length of the list that you have here. This will be done in just a moment, and then I'm going to move through it. Okay, so let's look at some pieces of this and see what we can learn from what I've received from Ancestry. So let's take a look here. You're looking at, this is the top of my list. This is Myra Sherman, who is my first cousin, and I've known her all of her life. What I'm able to do on Ancestry is, if you're looking now just to the right of that red arrow, you'll see a red dot. I'll explain that to you in a moment. And you'll see some notes, and I'll explain that further to you in a moment. And I really like this feature on Ancestry. Now, if I blow that up, this is where the red dot came from. Ancestry allows you to assign different colored dots to different lines in your family. So, for example, yellow in my family is Bernstein, black is Bravo, red is Rubenstein and Mabel, which is on my mother's side. And I can then go through, I can do searches based on those in the results, and I can see results and I can keep track of them much better. You'll also see that I have notes, and those notes tell me that Myra is my first cousin. She's the daughter of my aunt and uncle, and that just helps me, particularly for people who I really don't know who they are, and I'm discovering them in my research. It helps me to do that. So if I go into the page where I have Myra Sherman, you'll see over here, this is where I enter the notes, and then over here they carry through, and they'll show up anytime I pull up her name. I can see that note. I know what branch of the family she's from, and I know what I find out about her, and I can edit those notes from time to time to add information as I get it. Let's take a look here. This is Lois Clark, showed up as a third or fourth cousin of mine. I have no idea who she is, but let me show you what I did with her. First of all, it shows me she's my third or fourth cousin. It shows me she does not have a tree. That's not very helpful to me. If they have a tree, it can be very helpful and help me do it. And here is where I've put the notes in about her. And you notice, if you can see the color of that dot, it's yellow. And so when I come back and click on her, bring it to this page, there are a couple things I can look at for Lois Clark. One is ethnicity, and one is shared matches. The ethnicity piece is interesting, but it doesn't really take me anywhere. It shows me that Lois and I are both 100% Jewish. Just as a side thought, if that said that Lois was 50% Jewish, that would tell me that one of her parents was not Jewish. If it told me she was 25% Jewish, that would lead me to a grandparent, etc. But I look at that once and I'm done. It also tells me where she's from in the same way that family tree DNA did, you saw earlier. Where I can find something is shared matches, and this shows who Lois Clark and I share matches with. And when I click on that, it brings me up a list, the top of which says you and Lois Clark, and it shows me all these people. Now, interestingly, I have already independently found for those people, they all have yellow dots. That means they're all somehow related to my Bernstein family. And now so I know that Lois Clark is likely a part of my Bernstein family. I don't know where, I don't know how, I don't know yet, but it gives me a great number of clues. Okay, so we saw that for Lois Clark, I really didn't find much of anything. Let's look at Amy Valley. She's listed as a third to fourth cousin. She's got a family tree of 2,419 people. That's a good-sized family tree. That may be helpful. I get excited when I see that, and it's an available tree. If there's like a little lock there, it means it's a private tree, and I have to get her permission to get into it. And you'll see that I have her shaded yellow. I have that yellow dot for her, and I have that she's the granddaughter of Maurice Bernstein. Well, how did I do that? Okay. I went in and I looked at her family tree because it was publicly available. Let me blow that up so you can see it. And you'll see there is Maurice Bernstein. I know who Maurice Bernstein is. I know because a number of years ago, my father mentioned to me that somewhere in the late 1920s, somebody drove through Cleveland from San Francisco, visited my grandparents. His name was Maurice Bernstein, and he owned a very famous seafood restaurant in San Francisco. I've been to that restaurant. It's since closed. I've talked to his daughter-in-law. Both of his sons were dead, and unfortunately the daughter-in-law didn't know much about it, but the DNA confirms what my father told me. So there I have Maurice Bernstein. Okay, now what you're looking at is a section of my family tree. And if you blow that up, you'll see that there is Maurice Bernstein in my family tree. If I go down here, you'll see that his children, and then if you go from there, and I blow that up, you'll see there's Amy Bernstein, and there's her husband that she married. His name was Valley. I have now made the connection, and I know exactly who she is. I've been in touch with her. She's a very nice young woman, and is working for the U.S. government. We have spoken by phone, but we've never had a chance to get together. So I hope that this whets your appetite for your DNA, so long as you're willing to risk finding out your family secrets. I would highly encourage you to do it. It gives you that scientific piece that you don't otherwise have, and allows you to find members of your family who you didn't know existed. So with that, let me say thank you and good luck in your research.